Hey everybody, welcome back to Swan Signal Live. Happy Friday to you. John looks a lot like Brandon Quittem today. We've got Brandon Quittem in the house. You all know him, fellow Swan, good friend of mine here on the show. John is taking the week or the day off with some family, so here we are, and we're going to talk some news, and we've got the sort of Bitcoin community expert on the fourth turning here with us. And you've heard him do some podcasts, probably, at least some of you have, on what Bitcoin did throughout the years. I think he's been an annual guest on the topic. And we've got him here. So I figured we'd kind of dive into that and weave in some of this news in Iran and Venezuela, the California billionaire tax. We can talk about all this stuff in the context of the fourth turning. We're just getting closer and closer. When did you write that essay, Brandon? Bitcoin and the Rhythms of History.
Yeah, I published that boy in 2020. Like most people, that year was kind of wild. I got married in February of 2020, got home from Costa Rica end of the month, and 8 days later, NBA shuts down, lockdown mode.
Yep.
And like most people, I'm isolated inside. Maybe not like most people. I have the weird obsession where I have to try to make sense of everything, even if that's not actually possible. I try my best. And out of an intensive, reading books, kind of like Charlie from Always Sunny in the background with all my strings connecting ideas.
Yeah.
Out of that exploration was the essay. And the reason why I ended up writing the essay is because I was confused trying to make sense of the world. And during that period, I read the book, The Fourth Turning. And I thought, okay, here's a thesis that roughly maps to the reality I'm seeing. It gave me some comfort knowing that this isn't necessarily a unique time in history, and we'll get through it. And all the things that seem crazy at the time have some sort of a logical explanation behind them. And so there it was. And then one other opening point is that I live in Minneapolis. So, we can't stay out of the national news lately. And I will say, thinking about the fourth turning is a lot more fun than living through the fourth turning. So,
True. Well, let's cover fourth turning related news from the week, or recently at least. Iran's currency has effectively collapsed. The rial is trading near 1.5 million per dollar. Back in the 1979, right after the 1979 revolution, it was once about 70 rial per dollar, and now we're at 1.5 million. So it's obviously wiped out savings accounts and it's making basic goods unaffordable. And obviously it's led to its collapse of the market. There's banking failures that are trying to be backstopped by the government through even more money creation. This all led to the cycle that we are familiar with as Bitcoiners, destroying any confidence in the money. The response by the citizenry has been, to find the harder money that they can that's accessible, which in many cases around the world is the dollar and gold, property, and yes, Bitcoin. So there's been widespread protests, crackdowns, and the country is, just really fracturing right now. And this is a pattern that we know happens, right? I mean, money is the foundation of society. It's the foundation of civilization, right? It's, you can say that there's possibly, other things like human decency or love or respect, mutual respect, or, other values and morals like that you could say is the foundation of civilization. What I'm talking about here is the functional foundation of civilization. And it is global. It has nothing to do with the laws and regulations. Obviously, there are laws and regulations that, try to affect it, but on face, it is not some kind of national or regional thing. It is a global thing. It's a necessary foundation for human civilization. We use it to create order and to transact and interact with one another in a way that we can do it without, like, I can do it with somebody I disagree with completely about anything. This is why we say Bitcoin is for enemies, right? Money is for enemies. Like, we can transact with our enemies with money. It's a neutral thing, even though we try to make it not neutral sometimes. So when the money collapses, this is what happens. And that's why we do need Bitcoin, because the US is also, facing this. We always think it can't happen to us, Brandon. But the dollar has been inflating faster and faster. More dollars have been created faster and faster. I think 40% roughly of all dollars created in American history has happened in the last 10 years. Something like that. Directionally correct. So we're on the same path, though, slower, but it's a gradually then suddenly situation, right?
Absolutely right. Couple points on Iran. So first off, feel awful for the Iranian citizens. Sounds like a massacre. Turn off the internet, shut down protests violently. I've heard numbers of tens of thousands killed. That's awful. So that's step one. Step two, in the fourth turning context, I think there's a couple interesting points here. One, it feels like this is the first fourth turning that's entirely global. This isn't an American thing. This isn't even a Western thing. It seems like, from my perspective, that after World War II, which was pretty global, the world sort of synchronized their generational cycles all together at that point.
Yeah.
So we're seeing the rise of populism on the left and the right all over the world, governments being overthrown, things that you would have never thought possible 10 years ago, 20 years ago, now happening practically every day. And so it feels to me, number one, we're in a global fourth turning. And number two, what else is unique here is that we're normally fourth turnings begin in a period of relative harder money or lower debt. Business as usual, then a crisis occurs, and then the money printer goes crazy to try to buy our way out of the crisis. You end the crisis with lots of debt, and you work your way out of that debt over the next decade or so. That's the standard template. However, this time we're starting with debt up to our eyeballs, and that is a very different spot to be in. It makes us a lot more fragile, and I think it puts the currencies at risk around the world. Obviously, the Iranian one, more or less hyperinflating, many other examples. And so to me, that feels like this fourth turning has another access, and that access will give us more volatility, because if you're in debt up to your eyeballs and you have currency issues, that affects the average person really negatively. And yeah, that's going to lead to protests. Cities are going to burn, etc. And so not a good sign. Luckily, this is the first fourth turning with already easy money, and it's also the first fourth turning with Bitcoin. And so this probably doesn't feel good for the Iranians who don't have Bitcoin today. But at least we do have a tool, voluntary, for people to opt into to at least protect their wealth. And hopefully that serves as a counterbalance to the increased volatility that I would expect. It's not going to be evenly distributed, but those who are looking hopefully can find an answer to mitigate some of the downside.
Venezuela is also experiencing some upheaval, and has been for quite some time under Maduro. There were periods of very quick inflation several times during his reign, you could say. So this crisis, escalated. There was, years of economic collapse and hyperinflation. There were kind of periods where it slowed down at least, but several spikes. Now it's become this acute geopolitical flashpoint, right? Because the United States did launch a military operation in early January, captured President Nicolas Maduro, as we all know, and his wife, and they flew them to New York to face narco-terrorism charges. So the arrest, and there's ongoing U.S. strikes and a de facto oil blockade, which has been effective in stopping 6 or 7 oil tankers with carrying sanctioned oil So Washington is signaled, not just signaled, like Trump has said outright that he wants to run Venezuela for the foreseeable future and transition its oil sector into more open to private, especially U.S. Oil companies. So the opposition leader, who possibly we'll never know, I guess, or we may know at some point, won an election against Maduro, but obviously was not allowed to take power. She presented her Nobel Peace Prize to Trump as a symbolic gesture, which I thought was a very interesting move, probably a savvy political move. And she highlighted, internal international debate over leadership, and at the same time, interim authorities under Delcy Rodriguez have engaged U.S. officials to stabilize the country and explore economic cooperation. I know that the market was up big in the days following the arrest of Maduro, and I've heard reports that this was welcome by at least a significant part of the citizenry in Venezuela. I think attitude will depend on whether or not it remains, will depend on what happens in the next few months in terms of control of Venezuela.
Yeah, I agree. I think a couple points here. One, just directly off your last one, I think the average person is happy about the regime change. But anytime you have a regime change, there is a power vacuum, like you mentioned. And I'm under no illusion that it's going to be smooth sailing for the country. Hopefully the US can assist there. I don't know how helpful that will be. History shows that we don't seem to be very effective at nation building, so I'm kind of skeptical. But hopefully with a despotic leader out of the way, the people of Venezuela can take back their country and rebuild. That's one. The second one, just to make some light here, is that we're going through crazy times. And the one bright side here is that the internet is going to just meme the revolution. And so
Yeah.
nonstop joke. So one that absolutely killed me was it was Diddy and Maduro in jail together. And Diddy is whispering in Maduro's ear. He's like, "Hey, bro, they got my oil too."
Let's go.
Oh, a little off color, but killed me. Had to share.
That's so good.
And then the next one here is like, why? So to be honest, I'm not tracking this one close enough to have strong opinions here, but we were riffing pre-show, like, why would the US do this? We use some cover fire like, hey, there's bad people there, we're just trying to help, or drug dealers, let's get rid of the drug dealers. But I think it looks more like geopolitical chess pieces moving around the board. Obviously oil in Venezuela, they also have a lot of rare earths. And right now, China has a stranglehold on the rare earth market. But more specifically, they don't have the only supply of rare earths. They essentially have all the capacity to refine them, which is a nasty business.
Yeah.
Rare earths are not actually that rare. There's a lot in the US. We just have decided not to go after them. We'd rather have other countries take on that pollution. But I could see the US building a strong relationship with the new version of Venezuela and then saying, hey, why don't you guys mine the rare earths here and also refine them, and we'll buy everything you refine.
Yeah.
And so that seems to make sense. It sounds like some Chinese officials were visiting Venezuela near to the military operation. So there's also a world where China is trying to bring Venezuela into their side of the chessboard. And if that's true, that'd be very bad for the US. They're a little too close to home, strategic natural resources there. So I think those two things line up pretty well in my mind. Any thoughts on implications or why?
I will address, there was a rumor that floated around about roughly 600,000 Bitcoin being held by Venezuela and what's going to happen to that in this situation. There is no verification of that, no on-chain evidence, no reliable sources that this is actually true. It is, it's a compelling rumor, and that's why it's, continued to persist. But just in case anybody out there has heard of it, there's no, evidence behind that. I think, I love the framing of Venezuela and becoming pulled into more of the open relationship in the markets for rare earths and for oil. I think it would be great for Venezuela and the citizens there. We know a couple of people. We have some good friends who are Bitcoiners from Venezuela and worked at Swan for some time. And it's a beautiful country and beautiful culture. So I think it would be good to bring them into the markets and help them build up their. It's been 3 decades or so of theft effectively from the top of all of the markets there. And so that's why the stock market reacted the way it did once he was taken out of the country. So I think it's probably a better future for Venezuela than it has been. And we'll see what the Trump administration does. Really, the ball's in their court right now, in his court right now. And we'll see what happens. He internationally has shown restraint. He doesn't create new wars. He's been trying to, reduce them or stop them or bring on ceasefires. And so his international posture has been, I would say, relatively restrained. I think he leans toward, let's bring them into the global marketplace and let's do business, right? He is a businessman. So if I had to guess, I think he'd lean in that direction, which would be good for Venezuela.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other thing with Venezuela, if people aren't aware, Venezuela is obviously natural resource rich. And in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they were the wealthiest country in South America. They're also one of the highest GDP per capita in the world during this period. And so you'd think a country like that would be able to maintain their posture of wealth because they're sitting on liquid gold under their feet. However, there's also a paradox here, which is often called the resource curse or the paradox of plenty. It goes by many names, but essentially says if you're a country with a natural resource glut under your ground, it leads to negative or malincentives, and you ultimately squander your resources.
Yeah.
Some sort of human nature. It's like we don't have to work, we don't have to build out new industries, we don't have to diversify. We just milk the oil that we have underneath us. And that also leads to corruption because whoever's getting paid off the oil is outrageously rich. And oftentimes, like the case in Venezuela, the government takes over the resources and then they screw it up.
Consolidates all the power. Yeah.
Exactly. And so full circle here, let's say we get rid of the bad leader taking advantage of the resources. I think Venezuela could have a very bright future. I'm optimistic about that. They have the capacity to do so, but I wouldn't say forever because the same resource curse might bite them in the butt in 50 years again or 100 years again.
Yep.
So interesting challenge. I would say the Middle East seems to be dealing with that quite well right now, generally, diversifying out of oil and into alternative energy, investing in technology, investing in all kinds of non-correlated industries. I think that's the way out of it. But easier said than done. Next point you made is Trump's international policy being more like an international businessman. Yeah. That's absolutely true. And I was trying to find a quote in my fourth turning essay from a few years ago. I'm not going to waste time looking it up now. But essentially, our founding fathers had a philosophy on foreign affairs, which was essentially, is this good for America? Is this good for trade for America? Mm-hmm. If the answer is no to that, we shouldn't be meddling abroad.
Yep.
So it's like expand our markets with mutual economic relationships. That should be our primary foreign policy posture. Yep. And I agree with that. And I think we've gotten pretty far away from that after World War II. We kind of took on the hegemonic position, and our leadership or deep state or whatever you call that, they did a lot of meddling abroad, which is maybe good for the economic empire, but it's certainly not good for the average American, let alone all the people we're blowing up abroad. And so I think it would be very positive for America if that pendulum swang back to OG American values, which was foreign policy is economic policy, period.
Country that it borders Venezuela to the southeast. It's called Guyana, and I lived there for about 2.5 years. And it's only 1.5 million people in the country. Almost all live on the coast. The rest is rainforest, and then there's a inland. There's a border with Brazil, and then Suriname on the other side. And small country, absolutely gorgeous. Just the land is absolutely beautiful. Huge rivers and rainforests. and very poor. And they recently discovered an absolute like shit ton of, it's the only word I could think of, because it was so much oil off their coast, which makes sense because it's just like an extension of the Venezuelan oil fields. And this discovery was made, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, and so everything's starting to come online now. And the resource curse is, certainly looming over Guyana. It could do so much good for that little country, but we'll see what happens. And I'm definitely keeping an eye on it, since it's been part of my personal history. I see you found the quote here.
Yeah, so the quote was George Washington during his farewell address in 1796. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is to extend our commercial relations with as little political connection as possible.
Yeah. Extend our commercial relations with as little political connection as possible. Yeah, that's very conservative, very like private capital. It's something that I think I could see Trump kind of fitting into that philosophy more than recent presidents of this country.
Definitely, yeah, it would be an America first posture.
I mean, like we went through 2-3 decades of neocon.
That's right.
Ideas, starting with the war in Iraq, which obviously was about oil and not about 9/11, and actually his dad's war as well.
Correct.
So yeah, those ideas that we should go out there and secure American interests, and sort of veil them with with either fear or security or morality, is a lot different than let's go and make a deal.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think from like a foreign policy military perspective, I think post World War II and more so in the Cold War, okay, Soviets are bad. What can we do to get rid of them? Okay, now Russia, what do we do to get rid of Russia? And so our security state or our CIA, whatever you want to call the folks in this posture, they have a lot of power to try and get rid of their adversaries. And so it appears that foreign policy in America was hijacked away from George Washington's perspective, more towards a neocon perspective, like you said.
Yeah.
And that does nothing good for America. That is like war game strategy from the CIA trying to enact their vision of the future rather than something like a republic that we sort of have here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, one other piece, sort of in this geopolitical of news, in this geopolitical vein, that we're going to lead into more of an abstract or conceptual conversation about the fourth turning, is California's 2026 Billionaire Tax Act, which is a ballot initiative, is trying to be a ballot initiative. They need to get about 850,000 signatures to put it on the ballot. Be a one-time 5% tax on net worth over $1 billion. Friedberg posted about this, David Friedberg of the All In podcast on Twitter, cited a private poll where 80 to 90% of affected individuals plan to relocate. I think Chamath Palihapitiya in that crew moved down to Austin to join Jason Calacanis. And no, it's not Chamath, sorry, David Sachs moved down there. And Chamath and Friedberg are looking at it, but they want to stay back and try to fight this thing. Friedberg argues the measure erodes private property rights. I mean, kills them completely, really, by empowering legislators to seize post-tax assets. So this is the difference here. It's not just a 5% tax on net worth over $1 billion. It has teeth that are arguably, I don't know if they're unprecedented in this country or not, but we are rooted in private property rights in this country for good reason. And there is a provision here in this proposed act that would allow the government to seize post-tax assets via majority vote, sparking a broader exodus of businesses and talent that could exacerbate California's $20 to $30 billion budget deficit and $1 trillion pension liability, which is just insane. So this is interesting, and I think will be discussed. This is really just the beginning. It's not on the ballot now. The next step is to get the signatures to put it on the ballot. The ballot measure would happen sometime in the early summer, it sounds like. So this will be a conversation throughout 2026, and there will be a debate about property rights. And then you've got, prominent politicians are leaning towards socialism, like Mamdani, who was, elected in a surprise in New York City as mayor of New York City recently. And so I can see this conversation really developing about private property rights and socialism, communism, and it's interesting to see this happening in this country. And I think it has some fourth turning vibes. A lot of distrust in institutions indicated here.
Absolutely. Couple points here. So income inequality reaches all-time highs during the crisis. And anytime that situation's going on, the average person feels hopeless. They're looking for a way out. And it's very easy to call the billionaires the bad guys. And so it's going to be popular amongst a large percentage of the country. I think it's the same symptom we see with Mamdani in New York. The social contract's broken. Young people don't have a chance at the American dream, so they want to burn it all down or find a scapegoat. And so I'm not surprised it comes up. I think your points on sharing why this is unprecedented are very valid. This is wrong for so many reasons. You started with one on the scale. Okay, you confiscate the money from the billionaires. It doesn't do anything to the California state budget. Nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. Number two, anytime you introduce unreasonable taxes, I don't even want to call it a tax, the tax base leaves. We've got examples all over the place. Go look at France. It's only rational. And I think this one's particularly nasty because you're looking at your net worth from the prior year. And then you're saying sometime later, you're going to have to pay taxes on whatever your net worth was calculated at from a prior year. Okay, what if you're a startup founder in Silicon Valley and your wealth is tied to the equity of your company?
Right.
And then what? You got to sell 5% of your company's assets on the open market to cover this bill. And then you got to pay taxes on that 5% that you just sold. This is not workable. Companies are going to leave. Tax base is going to leave. Jobs are going to leave. So it's not effective. If you want to go after the billionaires, there's way better ways to do this. Raise capital gains, put a tax on taking US dollar loans against your assets, which is what all the wealthy people do anyways. They don't sell assets and realize capital gains. They just take dollar loans against their assets.
Yep.
And so those are things to, if you want to milk the billionaires a little bit more, that would be more effective. And I think I don't think anyone would fight that. No one would leave because of those. The next one is privacy. In order to enact this type of confiscation, you have to somehow audit all assets and value them, which means you need to do a whole bunch of digging into all their assets and valuing them and all this different stuff. And okay, it's just the billionaires, no big deal. Well, this is just setting up a new type of tax, and they're not going to stop at the billionaires. Fast forward 5 years, the California budget's blown out even more. You think they're going to stop? No, they're going to move it down a notch and then down a notch and then down a notch. And then all of a sudden they can tax the middle class whatever they want if they need to raise funds. And so I think the whole thing's crazy. I'm not surprised it's here. It won't be the last. We should do what we can to stop these type of things because they're going to affect all of us. And again, with the fraud, there's so much fraud in California. I live in Minnesota. They're kind of exposing that stuff now, but Minnesota is not the only state here. This is widespread. And if that's true, people are going to ask the question, why do you need my tax revenue if you just give the money away to fraud? And I think that's a valid question. And so to me, there's actually an opportunity here to rebuild trust. And make no mistake, we're not getting out of a fourth turning until we have some sort of a trust regaining campaign in the US. And one way to do that would be to say, oops, yes, there's lots of fraud. We held the people accountable. We recovered what we could, and we're sorry, and we're going to do better next time. I think that would be a way to start to repair trust. I'm not optimistic that that's going to happen overnight, or maybe it never will.
It sounds like Elon tried something like that, and Trump with Doge.
Yeah, they tried with Doge, failed. I think this campaign is, I don't even want to call it a campaign, but like the citizen journalism stuff, you sort of win hearts and minds when you go that route and you just show how blatantly obvious it is. As a Minnesotan, it very much pisses me off watching property taxes go up a ton while we went from a budget surplus to a budget deficit. Look at all the fraud. And so, yeah, I don't know. This one feels like it has more teeth where we'll actually get to the bottom of it.
Definitely, yeah.
Feels a lot different than Doge.
It's worldwide assets, right? This is done on worldwide assets. Net worth is calculated on global assets, so it's not just in the United States. So they're trying to get around this, like, ship the money out of the country into some tax haven thing, and then all of any illiquid assets, meaning any stock, any real estate, is given an estimated fair value using appraisals and comparable transactions, blah, 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 all that stuff. And then you have to pay the taxes on that. So if you don't have the cash, so let's say, a startup founder, a successful company, built a unicorn, $10, $50 billion company, whatever it is, owns half the company, and its value of his stock then, the fair value would be $25 billion, right? So he would have to pay 5% on the $25 billion, and that's completely unrealized, assets at that point. And so this is where the other side is framing this as a seizure, is because they're effectively forcing you to, liquidate these assets in order to pay the taxes, because they're counting it as, basically unrealized capital gains effectively. So it's being framed as a seizure. I think that's fair. It's not like the government's going to come knocking on their door. Maybe they will, actually, if they continue to just. Anyway, it's kind of messed up. This is like an idea that I think was proposed. Where was that, in France or something? Where was the unrealized capital gains tax stuff that was kind of seriously considered in Europe last summer? I can't remember.
Probably France.
So anyway, maybe not too far off that it would come out of California, I guess. But it's just not a great idea, and we'll see what happens. I did listen to the All In podcast prediction show recently, and both Friedberg and Chamath were confident that it would not even get on the ballot. So we'll see what happens. All right. So we've got Iran, Venezuela, California, all this stuff happening. Obviously, all of us here have been studying Bitcoin and understand what it means for our future. And it has an interesting role to play in this moment, as it's the reason you wrote this essay, Brandon, is it's all about the first turning, which will follow the fourth turning that we're in now, is all about rebuilding from the rubble of the fourth turning and the distrust of the fourth turning, these new institutions that will serve society for the next cycle. And we both think that Bitcoin is one of those things, obviously, and we'll dive into that too. Let's go through some of these images and charts from your essay, and we can do a little audio version back and forth here of the fourth turning and how Bitcoin ties into all of it. Let's start with this one. This chart's titled "The Supply versus Demand of Order," and I'll let Brandon explain it.
Yeah, so if we zoom out for a second, Fourth Turning, book written in the 90s by a historian and a demographer. They looked at the last, let's say, 500 years of American history, and they noticed, and they were just studying generational cohorts. What do we learn here? And they realized that there seems to be a repeating pattern. Every 80 to 90 years, we go through a fourth turning period, also called a crisis period, lasts 20 to 30 years. And during that period, they usually end up in war, and at the back end of war, the game board is reset, and we sort of have new geopolitical alignment, new civil institutions to sort of guide society for the next period of time. And then for some reason, there's some volatile period. At the end of that cycle, institutions decay, debt gets bad, whatever the reasons are, and then we kind of go through that cycle again. And what this chart is showing is two variables, and they are supply and demand of order. And you can think of order as how strong are our institutions, how strong is the civil infrastructure that keeps society going. And when the supply, what's supply of order? Institutions. What's demand for order? That's people looking around and saying, hey, our healthcare systems failing, our financial systems failing, and we really do want some more institutions to keep society from going off the rails. And the delta between the supply of order and the demand of order, that's where you get volatility. And so a lesser known part of the fourth turning is that midway through the cycle, the second turning is called an awakening. And that's when all the religious movements have happened throughout America's history. That'd be the psychedelic 60s and civil rights era. That would be the Puritans. That would be all these little periods of religious awakenings. And let's go through one full cycle with supply and demand, and we can kind of see these points. So the first turning is a period after conflict. So let's say the 1946 to 1965-ish. During that period, we're sick of fighting, lots of conflict. And so we're like, okay, we're done fighting. And at the same time, we're rebuilding our institutions. So that means that the supply of order is high. And so is the demand for order, because we just went through a crazy period. So we demand strong institutions, and we have them. So that's a pretty boring, stable period of history. That's when economic inequality hits its lowest. That's a strong middle class. That's when we built out the suburbs, etc. Then by the second turning, the kids who grew up in that stable, boring era, they're looking to push back on their parents' world. And so they're looking for sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Everything's so boring. And so the culture shifts towards a world where they demand less order. And at the same time, the institutions are still really strong and rigid, but the people want something more fluid and more spiritual or more interesting. And so supply high, demand low, that creates the conditions for an awakening. And then again, the variables chase each other here into the third turning, where the culture essentially starts tearing down institutions. And so the supply of order starts to hit rock bottom in the third turning. This would be up until 2008. So like 25 years before 2008, up to 2008. Deregulation, that's kind of the definition of that period, or the signpost for that period. And so we have very little institutions because we just tore them all down. And also we have no demand for those institutions because we haven't really realized the consequences of having weak institutions. Okay, the fourth turning enters, starts in 2008. Then we have a period where the pain of deregulation and getting rid of our institutions starts to become realized. Supply of institutions, supply of order low. We look around and we say, wait a minute, we got to rebuild. Society's going off the rails. So all of a sudden, demand for institutions spikes, demand for order spikes. And that delta sets the conditions for a crisis, which is where we're living through now. And I do have to give a shout out to Twitter. This chart should actually connect. So the fourth turning chart.
Yeah, I actually had seen that.
Yeah. This was a last minute addition. I mocked it up in Canva. It's a little off.
The blue line should start down here and go up, right?
Correct. Yeah, in the fourth turning, the supply of order should tick up to the point where it should meet where the chart.
Yeah. Yep.
Exactly.
I was going to ask about that. Okay, so here's another way to look at it. It's a cycle here, and how does the previous chart map here? Which cycles is hard times the first cycle, second cycle, third cycle? Where do we?
Let's see. Hard times create strong men. So that's fourth turning. The top is the fourth turning. We're in the hard times now. In order to get out of it, it demands strong men to take control, change the world, rebuild, etc. And after strong men take control of the reins, that creates good times, which would be the first turning. That's stability, that's boring, that's white picket fences, leave it to beaver, economic equality. And those good times raise children in a period of abundance. Those children go up and push back on society, and that ultimately creates weak men. So that would be the period of the second turning or the awakening. And then those weak men end up creating hard times by just removing the scaffolding of civilization during the third turning, again, deregulation. And that sows the seeds for hard times returning, which again demands strong men. And so you could look at this as like a fourth generation or third generation curse, same kind of deal. You could say, hey, why don't we have any wars right now or global wars right now? Well, because we still have people alive who experienced the last war. But as soon as all the people who experienced the last war are gone, all of a sudden no one remembers the horrors of war and we stumble ourselves back into it.
Yeah. At least
Same,
not the people with power. And
that's
yeah, and these are, this is referring, I think there's a kind of the idea of an abstract sort of cultural norm or properties of that generation, characteristics. But I think in terms of the institutional cycle and the trust cycle, I think it's mostly like people who have lots of responsibility or impact on the institutions themselves, or like, so this is, to me, talking a lot about like people who are kind of leading society and leading civil infrastructure, et cetera. Those characteristics. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like, obviously it's not everyone in your generation or something, but it's like the characteristics of the people who are the leaders of that generation. That's how I've always thought about it anyway.
Yeah, I think that's right. Some people get their panties in a bunch because they're, well, all boomers aren't like this, or all millennials. Yeah, of course not. This is not prescriptive of everyone in every generational cohort. These are extremely broad strokes.
Right.
The underlying philosophy here is that we're all born at the same period. Let's say we're millennials. We're born in this tight window of time. During that tight window of time, the world that we grow up in is relatively the same. And so if the world we grow up in is relatively the same, then our upbringing is relatively the same. So now all of a sudden we're 18 years old, we leave our parents' nest and we go out in the world, college or whatever, and now we're living with our peers. So that like 18 to 25 period is when we leave the nest, we're living only with our peers, and we sort of cement our hopes, fears, wishes, dreams, how we react to the world, our posture to the world. That all gets impact our perspective on the world in a way that's relatively consistent with our generational peers. Of course, there's outliers, etc., but the broad strokes align.
All right. So Brandon blipped for just a second there, but only like 5 seconds. Profits. What's that?
They don't want to put this information out, do they?
They don't. They're trying to censor you right now. That's always that's like the best joke when you're on the live stream and there's some technical difficulty. Okay. So this is getting into the characteristics of these generations, broad strokes, like Brandon said, and this maps to the same way, right? So we've got fourth turning at the top all the way over to first turning. Is that right?
So those are the different archetypes. The authors identified 4, and they go into repeating patterns.
And they're associated with each turning.
They are associated with each turning, but it depends when they were raised. So let's take the millennial, that's us. We're the hero generation. We were born in the 3rd turning, raised in the 3rd turning, and we come of age in the 4th turning.
Right.
And so we're like the young fodder in the older generation's war, essentially. Prior hero archetype was the GIs. So that was the 20-something, 30-somethings that went to war during World War II.
Yep.
Prior to that was the Republican generation, similar issue there. And the key is just what turning are you born in, and then when do you come of age? And that sort of defines these archetypes. And then the turnings themselves are downstream of these archetypes. Which stage of life are they? So in the 4th turning, the heroes, again, are the young fodders. But the prophets, which are the boomer generation, they're the sort of the idealistic, do as I say, not as I do crowd. They're in control every time we have total war. And the millennials are like, yeah, we're team players. Let's go get it done. And we go to war for them. In the middle there, you have the artists. They're born during the 4th turning. So people are like, why are Gen Z so weird? Why are they bad socially? Why this or that? It's because that all they know is a crazy, crazy world. And that shapes the generation to be more introspective, more emotional, less social, less team-oriented, which feels very weird for millennials in a sense. And then the other one is the nomads, which would be the Gen Xers. These are the pragmatic individualists. This is like the Elon Musk, Peter Thiel archetype. They don't really care about society. They care about themselves in general. And in 4th turnings, they're sort of like the military leaders who are the pragmatic ones who actually get the job done. The profit boomers are just waving their wand, and the nomads do the hard things, make the hard decisions. They're
waving their fiat wand,
exactly,
stealing from the future generations.
exactly. And again, the constellation of these archetypes, which stage of life are they in? That's how the mood is set. All right.
Okay, so this is a good chart to look at it from our conversation earlier, and this is probably a few years old, right? So if your essays,
Yes.
I would love to see these numbers now, especially for like the Southwest and Texas in particular. But the question here on this chart is: do you support or oppose the idea of your state peacefully withdrawing from the United States of America and the federal government? So, secession supporters. And it's very interesting. So New England is the lowest at 19%. Mid-Atlantic, Southeast, Great Lakes, the Plains, the Rockies, the far west are all within 21 to 26%. And then the Southwest is at 34%, significant outlier in the Southwest. So this is fascinating. I really want to, I'm going to see if I can find an updated number while you talk about this, but this is sort of a indication, some data that indicates that maybe you're in this fourth turning era where the distrust in institutions is starting to crumble or fracturing at the very least.
Yeah, this one's really important. So if I remember right, this chart's from about 10 years ago.
Okay.
So that puts us before COVID, before the recent stuff we're experiencing now. So I expect this to be way worse. And what do we take away from this? This is a little bit of federalism, like states disagreeing with federal government. But I think what this really shows is that the political climate is just extremely divided, and nobody wants to break bread with the other side. And both sides entrench themselves, makes the problem worse. The media, they get paid on clicks or subscriptions, so they're essentially feeding red meat to their base. And again, the cycle just rallies from there. Two other stats that are kind of in the same vein. I'll ask you first, Brady. They did a recent poll, I think it was last year. What percentage of marriages, I want to say in 2025, were between a Republican and a Democrat?
Of like new marriages in 2025?
Yep.
What percentage were between a Republican and a Democrat? I mean, it must be pretty low to be asking the question. I'll say 20%.
4.
Nuh-uh. That's
4%.
insane.
Yeah. I don't know the methodology. Maybe it's hard to get this information, but I think no matter how you look at it, the number is super low. I feel this in my own personal life, like social groups in a way have fractured, or if you're in mixed party company, people are just kind of walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
There's some tension there. It doesn't feel good. And so I think that's real. Another poll related, I don't even have the numbers here, but they're equally as alarming, which is, do you support violence to get your political vision enacted? And it's like 20, 30% or higher. And so that's insane. People are willing to support violence to get their political will. Not okay. Again, I feel this in Minneapolis. I see this. We all see this on the internet. And so these are very scary trends. These are trends that make the risk of a potential second civil war in America go up.
Yep.
You see, that would be the worst case scenario. But it kind of feels like that. If I want to be optimistic for a second, drawing on a little bit of Balaji's recent commentary, he's not the only one, but he's who I listened to recently. And Balaji is essentially saying this is an opportunity for the U.S. to go back to a more federalist approach, which is that the states have more power than the federal government, and the states are each little experiments trying out different policy based on the will of the people. And in that world, maybe you have commie state over here, and you have like guns and trucks over there, and then you have digital property rights over here, and you have nuclear energy is deregulated over there, or whatever. Just making up axes here. But essentially, what if we went back to a world where the states were radically different from each other and people could choose the politics that align with them? Obviously, not everyone can just like snap their fingers and move. Most people just accept whatever their state does. But over the long term, I think that's number one, how America was a strong country to begin with, and number two, in the long term, I think most people would have politics that support their values. They'd be more aligned to their values over time because people would move around and the states would diverge from each other. I think that's a great outcome.
So I did find some numbers, trying to find a chart over time, but these are the most recent numbers. Polling conducted between 2023 and 2025, large samples done by YouGov. Alaska is at 36% supporting secession, 33% oppose. So there's some big undecided there. In Texas, 31% support. And that might not be too surprising to me because I think, federal leadership has probably aligned closer to Texas as of late. We've had 2 Trump terms in the past 12 years. Well, once he finishes his term, it'll be 8 out of 12 years. California is at 29% supporting it outright, but 44% support placing it on the ballot. 44% support putting secession on the ballot in California. It's wild.
Super wild. One more state point is I don't see a way that California gets out of their financial issues. And what happens then? Okay, California goes bankrupt. What do? They call the Fed and the Fed bails them out. And so you can't sit in your red state and say, oh, screw California. It's not going to affect me. That's not what's going to happen. The states will get bailed out, which means the currency is sacrificed in order to do that. And so something about a train is coming to mind here. And
then, oh yeah, something never stops this train. You don't stop it. You can't stop it.
No, can't stop the train.
Fiscal dominance, y'all. Okay, Naval, a little wisdom. There are only 2 ways to coordinate human societies at scale: are free markets and physical power. Any ideology rejecting free markets is just advocating for power. Socialism, communism, and fascism all converge to the same endpoint: rule by the biggest thug. Free markets, property rights is really the magic sauce to run a sustainable, relatively free society. Exactly
right. And again, this points to, I think wisdom is the right description here. I think this is evergreen wisdom throughout history. This is just what we've learned about civilization. Either you allow the invisible hand of the market and property rights and other social scalability technologies we have, like a legal system, etc. Either you allow those things to be the infrastructure for society, and then humans go create value because it's in their best interest, and then we all benefit, or the biggest thug rules and they redistribute wealth however they see fit and they make decisions. And I get why young people want their thug to redistribute wealth because it feels unfair, and in many ways it is unfair. And I very much empathize with the American dream being gone for young people. However, that doesn't mean you should vote your guy in with the big stick to redistribute wealth. We know that doesn't work. And so by going down that route, you sow your own demise. And this is also true for populist right or fascism adjacent type policy. It's the same strategy, but on the right, big stick, will do what we want in the world. And so I think, everywhere you look, it's populism rising. This is a symptom, this is a response. This is just a symptom of the underlying issues. And if we don't fix the underlying issues, we should expect more on both sides of the aisle. And I think we're very much in it still. And to all we're already in the 4th turning now, bros.
I was just going to ask that.
I'm sorry, you're mistaken.
Not into the 1st turning just yet. Okay, so talk specifically now about Bitcoin. Born in a 4th turning, and fiat is crumbling, which is certainly an institution. It's not a civil institution, but it's a civilizational institution. And what role does Bitcoin have to play in the rebuilding of the institution that is money?
Yes, good question. So a couple points. One, Bitcoin is fourth turning money. It's born of the fourth turning. It emerged during a fourth turning. And that's the only time we could realistically expect something like Bitcoin to emerge. Okay, why is that? Well, if we're in great economic conditions and we have strong institutions and societies functioning, no one would conceive of the need for having Bitcoin, right? And so the cypherpunks had incredible foresight in the 90s. They're looking ahead at the digital panopticon that was being formed, and way ahead of their time. They could forecast that if this continues, we will build ourselves a digital trap. And so the idea started in the 90s, which is the third turning. I think they were lucky, but the population started to understand these ideas clearly in the fourth turning. Obviously, Satoshi's white paper was in 08. That marks the beginning of the fourth turning. And over time, as the mood or the geopolitical social climate changed, the idea of Bitcoin has gained popularity. We're watching the money printer go burr. We're watching the debt go crazy. We're watching confiscation potentially, et cetera. All these things lead people to finding Bitcoin. And so there's point one. It emerged out of the fourth turning by necessity. It's being adopted in the fourth turning again because people need the tool. And so that's point one. Point two, how do we get out of this fourth turning? The key point is rebuild trust in our institutions. Usually this is last minute after a war. So think Bretton Woods, World Bank, NATO, IMF, all these sort of institutions that are in direct response to the crisis we just went through. So at the last hour, we rebuild everything and hurry up and set the foundation. And then typically the foundation works for a period of time, and then through entropy or other reasons, institutions decay. So that's point one, strong institutions we need. The second one we touched on earlier is that the debt problem is becoming massive. And so the way I see the fourth turning resolution is institutional confidence or trust and the debt being figured out. And so, okay, properly understood, Bitcoin is a new type of institution. It is a internet native, decentralized, voluntary, global, borderless, open, neutral type of institution. Doesn't matter what your political persuasion is, Bitcoin plays a role. And it allows us to outsource our trust into a protocol instead of people setting monetary policy. And we know what happens when people set monetary policy. Eventually, we get over our skis and we got to do a reset. Throughout history, debt jubilees were common. In some places, every time there was a new king, all previous debts were wiped. Right. So this seems to be a common reoccurring theme for citizens, is that if we control the money, we screw it up. And so I think Bitcoin is essentially the recognition that humans should not be in control of monetary policy. Instead, we should outsource that to the machines. And so that's the Bitcoin as an institution idea. The second one is the debt problem. This one is a little, I would say, a little less linear in the thinking. It's not like Bitcoin arrives and the debt problem disappears. I would consider it more like a tool to help anyone who opts into the system. And so if you're an individual and you're in Iran and your country's going through a currency collapse, well, if you had some foresight and stored some of your savings in Bitcoin, you would essentially be insulated from your local issue, right? So the debt problem wasn't a big deal for you personally. Maybe for your neighbor it was. And you can scale this to the company level. Michael Saylor took a dwindling enterprise software company worth $1 billion, went all in on Bitcoin, big risk at the time, valuation up to 100 billion plus at one point, down a bit since. It's also true at the nation state level. So if your leaders have the foresight like Bukele to lean into the Bitcoin thing, maybe that reduces the volatility in your country. And so I view it as an opt-in way to not go down with the ship. And people are at their worst when they're backed into a corner, when they're desperate. And so this essentially reduces desperation by the adopters. And so I hope that means that we can sort of slowly transition to a new system over time rather than having a crack up boom. However, I'm not very confident in that because that's just not usually how these things go.
Yeah, but it is definitely the next evolution of money, right? It's going to restore trust in money, I guess, to follow the theme, and it is certainly an upgrade over fiat money for sure, for all the reasons that you listed there. Okay, we've got some quick hits. to go through. That was really fun, by the way. This is one a meme that Brandon made for his article. Hey, comrade, you haven't met your required dose of high fructose corn syrup. We sent $5 to your chip. Spend it at an approved vendor within 10 days. Or suffer the consequences, being the implication, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is the anti, freedom, anti-property rights world. And I don't know, there's some truth to this emerging from China for sure.
Absolutely. And just insider baseball, I had a lot of fun making this meme because I was Googling Soviet propaganda just to get like some picture. And I recommend going through propaganda throughout the ages. It's quite fascinating.
It really is.
And yeah, this was me kind of pushing back on an encroaching digital panopticon, again, from the cypherpunks, and also things like social credit scores or things like a US dollar stable coin, Fed coin.
Bucks. You nailed it there with Fed bucks.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's going to be a stable coin that's privately run and name only. This is a good one. Actually, let's just stick with this meme and then I'll go back to that video. But this was posted by Lynn Alden, right?
Yeah, I think she retweeted someone who posted this.
Yeah. Hey, sorry, I missed your message. I'm processing a nonstop 24/7 onslaught of information with a brain designed to eat berries in a cave. So good. I think we can all connect with that, and it just keeps getting faster and faster. It's one of those things where, like AI, what it does is process information and, organize it and present it to you. And you might think, oh, that's going to help. It's going to help me manage all of this information flow. But just like any new technology like this, it just creates more because it's that much more, that's that much easier to consume it, right? In the format you want to, specifically what you want to know. And so you're going to be on there because you're curious. Your brain wants to chew on berries, but it also has questions. It wants the answers. Quick one here. This is a chart from The Economist. Data centers, electricity consumption, percent of total by region. We've got China, Asia Pacific, and the rest of the world hovering down at 3% and below. And this is forecasted numbers for the next 5 years. U.S. is forecasted almost 10% of electricity consumption by data centers. So I think somebody said on pre-call, I don't think we need to worry so much about the Bitcoin sucking up energy and boiling the oceans argument anymore. AI is getting us off the hook on that one, even though it is a totally bullshit argument. So we need to build some nuclear power plants and other energy generating stations. This is cool. I mean, this is, because the United States is leading in AI and in Bitcoin mining.
That's right.
I like this one.
And key point here is that AI is not going anywhere. It's obviously a strategic advantage for the countries that lean in. We're leaning in. But in order to facilitate this, we do need a lot more energy. And we haven't built a new nuclear plant in like 50 years in the US or something like that. And so we're finding ourselves behind the curve here in a big way. And you juxtapose that with China, who's building ungodly amounts of energy right now. They're building more nuclear. I don't remember the numbers. I could be getting this wrong, but it's something like China is set to turn on more nuclear energy this year than all of the energy we produce in the US. And so it's just an enormous scale. Similar parallel there. They have a 250x capacity to build ships. So you take steel and you make boats and use them for the military, right? We're able to produce, let's say we're able to produce one ship a year here. China's able to produce 250 per year. So that leads into consequences over the potential conflict in Taiwan. If we can't produce munitions and we can't produce the ships we need, that's going to be a tough conflict for us. Enter drones. But we can maybe save defense 2.0 for another conversation.
So apparently a small reactor came online in Tennessee in 2016. And
really?
so there's some small stuff. 2016, 2 in Tennessee, 2 are coming online in Georgia. So starting to ramp back up slowly, but before that, it had been quite some time. All right. Let's see. Okay, this is just a good quick hit here. This was posted by Jameson Lopp on Twitter. These are failed cryptocurrencies by year, and you can see the chart spiking up from 2021. There were 3,000 up to 2025, 11.6 million failed cryptocurrencies. And it's just ridiculous. People spinning these things up all the time. Point being, you can't copy Bitcoin. You can't just copy Bitcoin. You can copy the code base, but there's a lot more to Bitcoin than the code base. So if anybody ever asks you that question, that one's, I think, dying off too, that piece of FUD. I don't hear it as much anymore. Used to be a big one.
One addendum to the nuclear power plant, the one that came online in 2016, started construction in the 70s.
No shit.
And recently,
two were completions of 1970s projects, but two were truly new builds. Yeah. So in the last 30 years, the United States has brought on 4 nuclear reactors. Probably 50 years. I just asked for the past 30 years.
Yeah. So, the Vogel ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we got to make a change there.
Yeah, that's another fun rabbit hole to go down on YouTube or whatever, is new nuclear technology, both fission and fusion. And there's just some really cool new tech. It's completely changed. It's super safe. You can do it on a small scale, like really small scale, but you can also do like plants to service regions that don't have to be enormous. Even if something goes wrong, the risks are much lower than they were in the past with the mega reactors. So it's to me the best way to go for generating power for a cities or a region, something like that. I still like solar for smaller houses or small community level or something like that. I think we'll get much bigger solar farms than that as well. But to me, I just see nuclear being so reliable, and now that it's become so much safer, it seems like the right way to go. That these other renewable resources are not really going to work to power these critical data infrastructure.
Yeah, and data centers for sure, but also just you have to have base load in any modern economy. Base load is the always-on energy supply.
Right.
This is like the thing that your hospital runs on. This is how a grid operates, and we don't have rolling blackouts all the time, etc. And base load is coming from either thermal energy, so you're burning fossil fuels of some kind, or nuclear, or in some cases you can kind of sort of consider hydro base load, but that's usually seasonal. So maybe half the year you have steady power, the other half the year you don't. Yeah. And so if you want to have a modern economy, you either need to burn fossil fuels or have a bunch of nuclear. There is no alternative. There's no world where solar or wind ever become baseload. If they do, they would require so much batteries that it would make it the most expensive form of energy we've ever invented.
Yeah.
And so for the environmentalists, pick your poison. We're either burning a bunch more nat gas, or we're going to do some nuclear.
And fusion has a good shot to be viable in the next 10 years. Like there's some really cool stuff happening on that front. And as tech just keeps getting, more exponentially more capable, and you have AI becoming exponentially more capable to solve some of those really difficult physics and materials problems that will help bring tech like that forward. So it should be a fascinating decade or two. First turning is going to really crush. It's an interesting time. Welcome to the asymptote of exponential curves, everyone. First turning, the asymptotic turning.
That's right.
All right. Any final thoughts, my friend?
No, just piggybacking on the first turning, I would say this was kind of a downer perspective on the world, but I'm certainly not pessimistic on the future. I'm optimistic about the future because we're at the tail end of this cycle. And if history rhymes, we should enter a period that's a lot more supportive of a middle class, a lot more supportive of, I hope, OG American values and not something like China. And so, yeah, I do see a bright future, and it's not going to last forever. Everyone go touch grass, turn off the internet, stop getting involved, focus on your local communities, focus on your family. That's the stuff that actually matters. And to your previous point, like, and Lynn's tweet, we're really not supposed to deal with an always on global world. That just causes tons of problems for us. And so I'd like to end on my favorite biologist, Edward O. Wilson, E.O. Wilson.
Yep.
He's got a
favorite as well. What a legend.
He's got a quote that nails this one. The real problem with humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Right? So it's kind of an evolutionary biology take. Our human hardware was forged in a period where we lived in small bands of hunter-gatherers. So our fears, hopes, wishes, dreams, why do I feel bad if I feel left out? Well, because being left out is like gene death. You're being ostracized from your community, which means you die and your genetic lineage ends, right? And so that's how we were forged. And then you transplant us in the future, right? Biology moves slow. Human civilization moves fast. So there's an acceleration of civilization, and we're still cavemen trying to eat berries. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed on the internet and you're feeling a little scattered or whatever, that makes sense. You're a fish out of water here. And it doesn't mean we put technology back in the box. It means you learn how to integrate modern society, taking into account what your meat suit needs.
That's right.
And your meat suit needs fundamentals. It needs sunshine, community, positive relationships, food, water, sleep, low stress, the absolute fundamentals. You don't need another pill. You don't need Ozempic. You need absolute fundamentals. And I'm not saying that to the role of you. I'm saying that to me as well. I need to eat my own medicine on that one for sure.
Thank you so much, my friends. That was a good way to finish. Go to swan.com/SSL, everyone, and check out Swan Bitcoin. And we have, let me pull this off so we can see your face. We have really our pride here. We take pride in building strong relationships with our clients. We build long-term, enduring, generational relationships. That's our intention, is to be with you and your family, to really build a plan to create generational wealth passed down through your family, for you as well, of course. We're extremely reachable, extremely high touch. Text, call, your Swan Private rep will be around. We also have an amazing world-class client services department that goes above and beyond. We had somebody just this week, and this is a weekly thing, really. We had somebody save 8 Bitcoin. One of our clients was about to lose 8 Bitcoin. And fortunately, the client services team was able to, stop that from happening. And this happens on a regular basis because we have such, we're so accessible and we're just there. And our clients just know that they can reach out and get in touch, and that we'll help out in whatever way we can. That's the kind of company this is. But we are also very dedicated to building great products, to really innovating, to building great security. We host amazing events for our clients where we can gather together. We'll have people give a talk or a little fireside chat, have apps and drinks, and get to meet some of the private rep guys or other swans on the team. We love doing those all over the country. We produce all kinds of content, not just this channel and Hurley's show on this channel, which if you haven't watched yet, check out Hurley's No Second Best. It's fantastic. We also produce other educational content and are always teaching people about Bitcoin. I told you about Swan Private. You can go here and check out this video. Some of our clients talking about the service and learn about the comprehensive wealth platform, all the services available here. We have an IRA account. Put real Bitcoin into your IRA. Come and play with this fun calculator. Put your own assumptions in. See what Bitcoin can do for your retirement accounts. Swan Vault is our advanced Bitcoin cold storage, made very simple. You can listen to Adam Back and Lynn Alden talk about Swan Vault here. And it's just a 2 of 3 self-custody. It's collaborative self-custody. You will have complete control over your Bitcoin. You're holding it in self-custody, but you don't have to do it alone, which is, I think, really the best way for many people who want to get into self-custody to go. So Swan Vault's awesome. We have Swan Generations, which you can sign up for priority access. This is giving Bitcoin to the next generation with dedicated wallet, irrevocable gifts, flexible ascension ages, etc. So this is really built as part of the Swan brand. We've always talked about generational wealth, and so we built this product to really codify that, to put it into a service. And it's brand new, but it will be coming online very soon. If you're a Swan Private client, you can get the priority access here, and we would love to have you a part of the Swan family. So go to swan.com/SSO. Brandon's been around from the very beginning. The two of us were two of the very first guys besides Jan and Corey. So it's been quite a ride. Very proud to be here, though.
Very proud to be here. 6 years, just like boom.
Went by fast. All right, my friend, have a good one. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back. This is a long one. It's on the longer end. I got sucked into a conversation with Brandon, which happens on a regular basis, whether or not we're on screen here. Everyone have a great weekend. We'll see you next Friday. John should be back, and we'll do the same thing again.